This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, where I'm very pleased to be joined today by Susan Bradford from Springfield, Virginia, where we're bringing you the news you need to know. It's possible Giuseppe, or actually Scorpio, may join us subsequently. The evidence of fraud in this election is overwhelming, far beyond the ken. Never seen anything like it. Here you have the Trump legal advisor, Jenna Ellis, discussing the 138,000 Michigan Biden votes that appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the night. Last night, Trump was leading significantly in several swing states, including Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Had a sizable lead in Wisconsin and Michigan. But this morning, Sleepy Joe somehow took the lead. Michigan County discovered omitting votes for Trump in the most divisive contested presidential election in American history. The public's being told of voter irregularities in Detroit. But even in supposedly safe Republican areas, votes for President Trump are appearing to be suppressed, with an allegation of 600 discovered today in one Michigan precinct. Michigan is 83 counties, St. Clair County, 163,040. As of this past August, there were 127,963 registered voters. The county today reports 134,000 registered voters, of whom 92,670 voted in the November 3rd election. Eagle-eyed State Representative Shane Hernandez spotted the vote discrepancy being reported in his home county of St. Clair. Contacting his county clerk, it showed absentee ballots for the president. The clerk fixed the area and updated the totals. I saw there were missing votes, but there's much more going on. Here, Ballot Count Watcher describes at least 130,000 ballots, all for Biden, arriving in 3 vehicles in Detroit in the dead of night. In the testimonial, she said people who were there counting ballots throughout the evening were ready to shut down, when suddenly a white van, a Chrysler 300 and a Ferrari, pulled up with over 130,000 additional ballots. As they started counting, they were astonished. Every single ballot, literally 100% of 130,000 ballots, were all Biden ballots that had not been delivered to the precinct before the cutoff time. Here we have a Michigan county clerk discovering total votes counted by election software did not match the printed tabulator tapes. Susan, these are all reports just from Michigan, but we know there's much more going on across the board. Your thoughts?
I was watching the votes being tabulated here in Virginia, and I remember that my state was leaning red, and then 15 minutes later it was called for Biden. And I actually looked at the state. Trump, I believe, was ahead by 200,000 votes. And he had a 20% lead over Biden. They call it for Biden. And Jim, I don't know if you've heard of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Are you familiar with that offhand?
Yeah, the idea of states are going to cast all their electors for whoever wins the popular vote.
Yes. So how does that work exactly? Because Virginia signed on to that. So are they saying that the electors can vote for whomever they want, regardless of the popular opinion, and then only if the person comes up with 270, then they have to give their votes over to that candidate? Is it on a national level?
I think the legality of this kind of compact is going to be subject to Supreme Court scrutiny, as are so many other aspects of this election, Susan. We've never seen anything like it. It is so blatant. And hundreds of indications of voter theft of one form or another all over the place. And yet the mainstream media, I was just astonished. Lester Holt last night on NBC saying there's no evidence of any impropriety in the election anywhere. I mean, it's just monstrous.
Yeah, it's like they're gaslighting the public. You know, they're trying to tell us what we can't see with our own eyes. And I remember, like, here in Virginia, around the voting booths, the voting facilities, there were dozens of Biden signs, but all of the people going in to vote all had Trump paraphernalia. So there was a great groundswell of support for Trump. And then they're trying to tell us that Biden won by a large margin. I'm not seeing it.
Susan, I think you got it exactly right. We'll look now at some other indications of what's really going on. 2020 election irregularities, why President Trump is contesting the supposed results. This is from Dr. Eowyn, another retired professor who maintains the Fellowship of the Mind's blog, which I highly recommend. Number one, mail-in ballots are banned in most developed countries except the United States due to demonstrated fraud. Here's John Lott of the Crime Prevention Research Center, who happens to be an expert on guns, by the way, and how when guns are banned, crime goes up. Most developed countries ban absentee ballots unless a citizen is living abroad or require photo IDs to obtain those ballots. Even higher percentages of European Union or other European countries ban absentee for in-country voters. In addition, some countries that allow voting by mail for citizens living in the country don't allow it for everyone. Second, no blue wave in House or Senate races, but we're supposed to believe there was a blue wave only in the Trump-Biden race. As I will emphasize, this appears to be a tell. In other words, they submitted millions of fake votes just for Joe Biden and didn't work their way down the ticket, which meant that since the Republicans picked up seats in the House and had only one loss in the Senate, that's a prima facie proof that this was massive fraud. Three, honest people do not fear or resist transparency, but Republican poll watchers were prevented from watching the poll counting in their respective locales, including in Arizona, in Philadelphia, in Georgia, in Michigan. Fourth, on election night, just when the vote count showed President Trump leading and winning, vote counting was abruptly halted in critical battleground states. Then when the vote counting resumed the next morning and after, suddenly Joe Biden was receiving more votes than Trump. Particularly damning is the fact that election officials in Michigan and Wisconsin, which have declared Biden the winner, refused to explain Biden's sudden and dramatic vote tally increase Wednesday morning. Fifth, ballot dump. Magic ballots suddenly are discovered. As an example, on Wednesday in Georgia, 61,367 absentee ballots suddenly materialized. Georgia's Secretary of State's office said there were actually 50 to 60,000 uncounted ballots remaining as of 8:30, more than initially thought early this morning. Six, mail-in ballot irregularities. A U.S. Postal Service employee told Project Veritas that they were ordered by their superiors to backdate late mail-in ballots as having been received on November 3rd. How disgusting is that? Seven, non-residents and dead people voted. The Trump campaign is filing a federal lawsuit in Las Vegas to stop the counting of illegal votes. The campaign claims to have evidence that tens of thousands of persons who are deceased and non-residents have cast ballots in the 2020 election. That's a pretty standard practice, the counting, casting of people who are dead, Susan, as you know. But these other examples are egregious, blatant, overwhelming evidence of fraud.
I agree with you. I think what I hope Trump is doing, he's allowing this fraud to happen so that the public can see for themselves that the Democratic Party has been rigging elections. They're engaging in election fraud. I mean, it's a very, illegal. It's actually illegal what they're doing. And I think he's wanting the people to kind of take back their power and to challenge the fraud in their respective districts. So I think it's becoming so blatant, and our votes are not being respected. So we're all, as a nation, we're being disenfranchised.
Yes, we'll get further thoughts along that line as we proceed. Here's what's going on. Here's, I think, how you can tell for a certainty that there's massive fraud on an unprecedented scale. Minnesota and Wisconsin both had 89 to 90% turnout, something that's not only highly unlikely, but would be historically unprecedented. Susan, I lived in Duluth, Minnesota for 19 years, which regularly had the highest voter turnout in the nation. And it was around high 60, 70%.
Exactly.
You're talking about 89 to 90%. That's indicating the extent to which they have massively inflated the number of ballots by, it looks like, as much as 20%. Here's another indication: presidential election turnout. In 2004 in Minnesota and Wisconsin. In Minnesota, 2004, 79, 2008, 78, 2012, 76, 2016, 75. Then 2020, a great leap to 90. But meanwhile, Wisconsin, 2004, 73, 2008, 69, 2012, 70, 2016, 67. Then a great leap to 89. You got to look in Wisconsin. That's a 22% increase. And in Minnesota, 15. These are outrageous. It does not happen. Meanwhile, despite Pelosi's confident predictions, the House Democrats lost seats. So what happened? It's precisely as I explained before. They only submitted the ballots for the presidential race. They didn't work their way downstream, so that all the claims they were making about how this was going to be a blue wave, Nancy's having to try to explain her way out of it when she knows perfectly well what actually happened. In a private call with Democrats Thursday, Pelosi spoke about the challenging election in tough races. We held the House. Joe Biden's on a clear path to be the next president. This has been a life or death fight for the very fate of our nation. We did not win every battle, but we did win the war. Very different tone. In the days leading to the election, when they were boasting they would increase their majority, talking of winning a 5 to 15. But meanwhile, it's been more like the opposite, where the Republicans actually won 22 of some 25 contested House seats. And of course, the Democrats were only able to pick up one so far in the Senate. Meanwhile, and this is, to my mind, Susan, an absolute killer and decisive proof of fraudulence. Remember, we were told that Trump would get the economy vote and that Biden would get the COVID vote. But U.S. counties showing the worst surge in COVID cases overwhelmingly voted for Trump. Counties that experience the worst have overwhelmingly voted for Trump, won the majority of votes of more than 90% of the 376 counties with the highest number of COVID cases. Most were rural areas in Midwestern states where there's high opposition to social distancing and face mask guidelines. President Trump won the support of voters. Really stunning stuff. The AP highlighted that most of them were in rural counties, but it seems to me it puts the lie to the claim that COVID was a dominant issue. And of course, the Democrats were talking about Texas. Well, here's how Texas went. They never had a chance. The whole nation would look like this if we were being given an honest count, Susan. It's outrageous. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it is outrageous. And I think that Biden wanted to have a mandatory mask and to have like a kind of like a permanent lockdown situation to defeat coronavirus. I think that those areas that were most afflicted with the disease weren't on board with that agenda. And I think if there were a groundswell of support, you mentioned like these different numbers, they would have gone towards Trump, because it's very clear, that Trump commanded huge rallies, thousands of people, whereas Biden could barely, fill a parking lot. So it's just, you would have thought it would have been the other direction. And
they could only fill a parking lot by creating phony events where you came in your automobile and honked your horn. When Biden came here to Kenosha, Wisconsin, after Trump had been here and had 5 blocks long of citizens waiting to greet him. There was one woman, a school teacher, out to greet Joe Biden. And in Asheville, North Carolina, which is an enclave of liberal support, when Kamala Harris came, a friend of mine explained she had a group of 12, but 11 of them were him and 10 of his friends who went to hassle her, but felt sorry for her because she only had one turnout. And reporters in Arizona, Susan, were dumbfounded when there was a joint effort of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and nobody, not one person turned out. So you're telling me this guy has hauled in the biggest turnout in American political history?
I guess maybe that's part of the purpose of the lockdown. That they wanted the public to believe that all of their supporters were staying home because they were afraid of coronavirus.
Yeah.
So there was this
yes. And to destroy the economy and the surging stock market, the major, and have people vote on what direction the country's going in, not to separate that out from who's the best guy to fix it. Just as Frank Luntz, after the second debate, had 13 undecided voters from 11 states. And when he asked them toward the end, who do you think would be better to fix the economy? Show of hands. Joe Biden, 0. Not a single hand went up. Donald Trump, all 13, Susan. I mean, talk about our being played here. This is insulting beyond belief. Meanwhile, and this is utterly fascinating, are we about to witness the greatest military sting operation of all time? Very good point. Why did the DHS take over from the corrupt voter fraud commission? This is far from over. The Democrats printed extra ballots not knowing about a non-radioactive isotope watermark on the official ballots. This is a military sting operation. I was raising questions for confirmation. I got this response. This is John Michael Chambers. I can confirm the blockchain aspect is accurate from my source closely held to the Trump camp. I was informed of this 2 months ago, and Q has told us we have the digital theft under control. Q has posted this after the 2018 primary theft. We mentioned the blockchain aspect on my election night broadcast. Here's another. Trump set up Democrats in a sting operation to catch them stealing the election. This is Steve Pieczenick reporting, where Steve Pieczenick is a very reliable guy. Check this out, Susan. Pieczenick.
But Dr. Steve Pieczenick, as we're in the middle of this, the election's over. We're now in the stealing process of the election. What are you seeing? What's going through your mind as you're witnessing this gigantic hoax?
Let me just say again what I said in 2016. There are honorable members of our intelligence, military, and civilian community in the government who understood exactly how corrupt Biden and the Democratic machinery is, was, and will be. This is really a sting operation, contrary to what everybody else said. Trump knew this was happening. Eric knew this was happening and warned the public. I knew this was happening. However, I could not say anything about it. What happened was we watermarked every ballot with what's called the QFS blockchain encryption code. In other words, we know pretty well where every ballot is, where it went, and who has it. So this is not a stolen election. On the contrary, we reversed the entire game of war along the lines of Sun Tzu, the art of war. And Trump was brilliant and still is brilliant at it. The reason he hasn't been seen, and Alex correctly said, oh, I haven't seen him in several days. Well, in the art of the war, you pull back, allow your enemy to make all the mistakes that they are making, manipulate the situation, expose them, and then come in for the final killing. And that's what's happening now. None of this was unexpected. All of this was expected. All of this is part of the sting operation we're running. And let me tell you that 48 hours ago, not only did we put markers on those ballots, but I can say now, with the permission of people in the intelligence community and elsewhere, that we have sent out thousands and thousands of National Guards to 12 different states: Washington, Delaware, Texas, Arizona, Alabama, and everywhere. So now you have to consider and rethink what this is really about. The genius of Trump is that he is able to pull back at any point and manipulate the opponent without the opponent ever realizing. He has said repeatedly, hashtag steal the vote. That's exactly what he has said for months. Then he made a very clear implication. He said, I will use common sense or my intelligence, i.e. both literal and figurative intelligence. And those of us in the intelligence community, be it who they are, again, what I said in 2016, when we exposed Hillary Clinton, we now exposed, and it was Trump who initiated this, Biden family. Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Jim Biden, Frank, the whole family was played right into a game where they were convicted, and you're seeing what's happening now. What was not announced was that we watermarked all the ballots with what I said at QFS blockchain, which is a very hard encryption code to break. And the second thing is we sent, probably 20,000 or more National Guards 48 hours ago. None of it was reported, and I thank the press for not reporting it and others. So what in fact is happening is you're seeing a sophisticated sting operation that was initiated by Trump. I'm just a lowly peasant in this game. And honestly, I was informed that I could say something about it today, only last night. That's why I could not come on.
Well,
This is the reverse of what you guys have been thinking. It's not a civil war. We have not been surprised in any way. This has been a setup by Trump for a long, long time. In the same way that we knew about Hillary Clinton, I warned about the coup that we would do a counter coup, and this is our counter coup again against the Bidens. And that's exactly what we expected. The corruption in the mail, the corruption of USPS, corruption with the Democrats, everywhere and anywhere. There was no surprise here. And that's why we deployed National Guard soldiers to 12 different states.
Well,
Nothing was said about it.
Steve, you've just broken certainly perhaps the biggest news since the election here on this show. Are arrests inevitably coming down the road?
Yeah. They're coming not just down the road, they're being implemented. What you saw Corey Wendowski and Pam Biondi saying when they were in Clay County and as well in Philadelphia, that was not just a threat. That was exactly what's going to happen. People will be arrested as of tonight, tomorrow, and it will go on for quite a while. And this was a total sting operation that I can say.
So
I will
explain
not be anybody else. I have the permission to say it. I do not deal with classified information, as you know. I do not work for our government, but because I'm loyal to the Republic, and I work with a lot of people who are loyal to this Republic, including the 16 intelligence services, the Secret Service, our civilian service, they've all been great, and they've kept it quiet. And I've been given the permission to say what I just said. I have nothing more to say, but this is not a surprise here. This is the biggest sting operation probably in our country that we've ever had.
So how is this watermark on the ballots? What is the significance of that as to, is it going to stop from fake ballots being counted, or how is that going to be used?
Well, we use it in any way that we need to use it in terms of counting, knowing which ones were fake, which ones were not. It's a very sophisticated code. So if you just throw them away, these are cyber communication implementations that we have the code for. We know exactly what was thrown away. We know exactly what was placed. We know exactly who has it, and we know exactly where it went. I can't go any further than that.
Let me just one further thought about this. Stephen Francis has published a nice piece, which is on my blog now. A Trump USPS blockchain sting will rescue the election. It's absolutely brilliant. It's now being revealed by many credible sources that President Donald Trump and the USPS have had a master plan all along to secure the integrity of the 2020 election. Blockchain is the key in their plan. An invisible and unique QFS code was printed on each and every USPS-produced ballot. They know exactly all the relevant details, including dates, past identities, and anonymized. As the saying goes, knowledge is power. One, if not of the first sites to expose this sting, is Alex Jones' War Room. Here's the video we just watched. Steve Pieczenick, Clancy Novels, Intelligence Legend is featured. There are a few MSM sites that have reported on the existence of the patent applications last August, but the articles have no indication that it was actually being implemented. They can be viewed at Business Insider, Forbes, Popular Mechanics, Cointelegraphic, and USPS news pages. Pieczenick's Wikipedia page is not flattering, which is a badge of honor to those in the art world. I'm pleased we have been rejoined now by Scorpio. Your thoughts, Scorpio? I know when I reported yesterday that this appeared to be in the works, you were a skeptic. You may or may not remain. Give us your thoughts.
Well, sorry I was a little late there, Jim. Been out there planting coconut trees. I wasn't sure how long it was going to take you to get your computer going, so my apologies. About Pieczenick, you know, he's one of those guys that sometimes he's spot on, and other times he seems to miss the mark. That's been my experience of his information. I certainly hope this is true, but I guess I remain skeptical and cautiously optimistic. The problem I'm having is that the mainstream media right now is 100% on board. Trump is a sore loser. He's questioning our democracy. He's destroying our democracy. And they're about to declare, coronate Joe Biden. So I hope this is true. I hope it happens. And we'll just have to wait and see.
But of course, the plan was to coronate him all along anyway, and to lay down the narrative that Trump would refuse to concede because he'd claim it was election fraud because they knew it would be election fraud, and he was too smart not to perceive it and complain about it. So all this is consistent with a fraudulent Democratic plan, where they did not anticipate the watermark as I see it. Susan, your thoughts?
Trump is an excellent field marshal. I mean, he anticipated exactly what they would do, thought up 5 steps ahead, and they walked right into his trap. I think that they anticipated that the Democrats would try to steal the election because they're terrified of the prosecutions that are coming, starting with the Biden crime family, which implicates a lot of them. And I'd actually heard about this blockchain technology a few months back. So I know that they had this in the works. And Charlie Ward, he's the host of the Charlie Ward Show, came out today to say that that Trump did in fact use the blockchain by a landslide. So what we're looking at now is that the Democratic Party, the deep state, are showing their hand. They're exposing the fraud behind the election, the dishonesty within the news, and the propaganda that they provide to us. And I think he's going to come out the winner of this. At least things don't look it's like smooth sailing, but I think he's going to come out the winner in the end.
Yeah, while I understand Scorpio's concerns about Pieczenick, he's a very smart guy, and his credibility would be completely destroyed if what he's saying is not accurate and true. So I'm inclined, given multiple sources that have supported it, Susan Lindauer, for example, who is a former CIA asset, who was their liaison with Saddam Hussein, who came back to report that Saddam was so eager to avoid war that he offered to buy 1 million cars a year for the next 10 years to avoid war. And if that were not enough, make it 20. Bush and Cheney had a plan in the works already, so they disregarded it and sought to discredit Susan. She wrote me earlier today that the governor of Nevada has identified 3,700 plus fake ballots, and she thought the exact number was indicative of them having had the technology that enabled them to nail it down as another form of confirmation. Scorpio, would you like to add a further thought?
Well, I see what you're saying. It's certainly a possibility. We really are in an all or nothing game here. I just don't see how the mainstream media is going to back down from their current position. They are 100% on board with this massive voter fraud. This is the most outrageous thing I've ever seen, to be honest with you. Trump was what, 6 points ahead in Pennsylvania, and now 90% of the votes coming in are for Joe Biden, and now Biden is ahead. This is just absolute in-your-face voter fraud.
Yeah, but remember, as Susan and I were saying, this was a guy who couldn't get 10 people to turn out for a rally. I mean, the idea that he's motivating the greatest voter turnout in history is completely absurd. Even the most dull-witted American, I think, is going to perceive the truth that this is cannot be the case.
I don't believe that the mainstream media is going to be able to recover from this. I think all of their credibility has been shot.
Yeah, Frank Lutz has already said that the polling business is kaput, but it's because they were on the inside. See, they knew from Democrats that there was going to be a massive landslide for Biden and that the rallies didn't matter. So they just went ahead and reported it using fake polling. But what Scorpio, what happened was they didn't properly calculate the outpouring for Trump again. The only reason it was close was because there was a huge outpouring for Trump. I'm trying to calculate the relative. We've seen the increase as much as 20-25% over standard polling, where you missed where I explained I was in Duluth for 19 years, where Duluth had the highest voter participation of any city in the country. And that was 69 or 70%. So when they talk about 89, 90%, it's completely absurd and shows that they have inflated the vote number by at least 20%. If you got 160 million, we're talking about 30 million votes that have been cast fraudulently in this election. I think that's going to be how it turns out. And they're going to be able to nail down every single one of them. This is my take, Scorpio. Your thoughts?
Interesting. I think Susan's right. If this does happen, the mainstream media is finished. They will never recover from this because they are all in. And Jim, it's kind of interesting. I was accepted to UM Duluth. I almost went there. So our paths may have crossed almost more than 25 years ago.
That's fascinating, Scorpio. Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating. Well, good people around the world are recognizing what's happening here. This is a message from the Archbishop Vigano to all American Catholics, actually to all Americans of goodwill, dear brothers and sisters. As devout Christians and faithful citizens of the United States, you have intense and heartfelt concern for the fate of your beloved country, while the final results of the presidential election are still uncertain. News of electoral fraud is multiplying despite the shameful attempts of the mainstream media to censor the truth of the facts in order to give their candidate the advantage. There are states in which the number of votes is greater than the number of voters. Others in which the mail-in votes seem to be exclusively in favor of Joe Biden. Others in which accounting of ballots has been suspended for no reason, or where sensational tampering has been discovered. Always and only against President Donald J. Trump. Always and only in favor of Biden. In truth, for months now, we've been witnessing a continuous trickle of staggered news of manipulated or censored information of crimes that have been silenced or covered up in the face of striking evidence and irrefutable testimony. We have seen the deep state organize itself well in advance to carry out the most colossal electoral fraud in history in order to ensure the defeat of the man who has strenuously opposed the establishment of the New World Order wanted by the children of darkness. In this battle, you have not failed, as is your sacred duty to make your own contribution by taking the side of the good. Enslaved by vices or blinded by infernal hatred against our Lord, have taken. Others, enslaved by vices or blinded by infernal hatred against our Lord, have taken the side of evil. This is absolutely stunning stuff. In these hours, while the gates of hell seem to prevail, allow me to address myself to you with an appeal. I ask you to make an act of trust in God, an act of humility and filial devotion to the Lord of armies. I ask you pray the Holy Rosary. He's asking for you to pray for the good and the right and the virtuous. Do not allow yourself to be discouraged by the deceptions of the enemy, even more so in this terrible hour in which the impudence of lying and fraud dares to challenge heaven. Our adversaries' hours are numbered if you will pray, if we will all pray with faith and with a true ardor of charity. In the days that await us are a precious occasion for all of you and for those who unite themselves spiritually to you from every part of the world. You have the honor and privilege of being able to participate in this victory, the victory of this spiritual battle. I pray with the certainty of our Lord's promise. May my appeal, which I address to you and to all people who recognize the Lordship of God, find you to be generous apostles and courageous witnesses of the spiritual rebirth of your beloved country. Well, as an agnostic, I can't put faith in God, but I can put faith in blockchain, and that Trump anticipated, because he would have been a colossal idiot not to, after the Democrats retook the House in 2018 with a completely fraudulent ballot. He's not a complete idiot. I therefore believe blockchain will reveal all, and the Archbishop's sentiments are not in vain. Scorpio, your thoughts?
That's a really powerful letter by the Archbishop Vigano. And, the current Pope, I believe, is deeply corrupt. He's even endorsed homosexuality and gay marriage recently. And there are many priests on the ground and other cardinals and bishops that understand that he is not a legitimate Pope, to be honest. And I think more and more people are going to defect from this horrific agenda that is underway. And this election is just part of it, to shoehorn a fraud like Joe Biden into office so he can lock the country down again and mandate masks. And I really believe this is a spiritual battle, and more people are going to defect once they realize the true dark nature of this plan as it unfolds before humanity.
Oh, I think you got it right. Susan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Scorpio was right on point there. I absolutely agree with him. I also think that that letter suggests that the power that we have as a people, and I think if the deep state were truly concerned that we didn't have that power, they wouldn't be wasting so much money trying to create the illusion that Biden had won. They would just simply seize the election. So I think it is incumbent upon us as ethical people and as people of integrity to make sure that our votes are counted. I disagree with a lot of the sentiments that have been kind of voiced, not in this particular circle, but in some of the conservative media, that we need to go to war with the liberals. I think that as Christian, I'm a Christian, that we should forgive them for they know not what they do, and to help educate the liberals and those who are a little skeptical of what is happening, because we are one people. They are united in their corruption. We need to be united in our goodness, and to be able to reach across the aisle to our families and our friends and help bring them on board so they can join us in the cause for good.
Those are wonderful sentiments, Susan, because some of us would simply conclude that they're gullible suckers and saps who've been played by the mainstream media, which has to be brought to account. This is so outrageous. And of course, they've been aided and abetted by the social media and all of their censorship. None of the Hunter laptop stories have made it into the mainstream. None of them.
None of them.
And
That's true.
Just notice the monstrousness. Scorpio, would you want to add a further thought?
Well, that's a great point. And, this censorship that they're engaging in, first of all, is an act of desperation, because we are in the information age, and trying to create censorship at this time is a desperate move, and it's ultimately not going to work. They've even deleted Trump's tweets because they were lies. And, they cut his speech off the other night after like 45 seconds and then said, well, he's lying, and so we're just going to turn the speech off because we're more powerful than the president. It's outrageous.
Yeah, truly, truly disgusting. You got it exactly right. Meanwhile, scamming votes, stealing elections is an American tradition. This is a wonderful book about it, Vote Scam, The Stealing of America, by James and Kenneth Collier, recounts a fascinating and daring investigative reporting project, how the American voting system works. How can the outcome of election be predicted accurately by exit polls? And how are the votes counted so fast? Why is so much of the process secret? This is the weirdest, wildest, most astonishing nonfiction detective story of the 1990s. An explosive investigation that tracks down, confronts, and names establishment crooks who elegantly steal the American vote for their own profit, becomes face to face with a Supreme Court justice who rigged a vote fraud case, the most powerful female publisher in America who won't let her newspapers and TV stations deal with vote rigging, and a cast of politicians, computer wizards, professors, lawyers, news people, aristocrats, CIA operatives, outraged citizens, conspiracy buffs, and crusaders involved in a scandal of unthinkable dimensions. That's all a figment of the past. What's going on now overwhelms it by many orders of magnitude. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court, in an earlier ruling this week, left in place a Pennsylvania rule that allowed late mail ballots with no or illegible postmarks to be included. The justices divided 4-4 Monday, an outcome that upheld a state Supreme Court ruling to allow election officials to receive and count ballots until November 6th, even if they don't have a clear postmark. Republicans, including President Trump's campaign, have opposed it, arguing it violates federal law, setting Election Day as the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Such a decision belongs to lawmakers, not the courts. They did receive a further ruling that those ballots had to be segregated pending a final decision. Chief Justice Roberts, and I find this dismaying, but I know he is not a free agent here, but he's under coercion, joined the three liberal justices to reject the Pennsylvania Republicans' call for the court to block the ruling, which would have been the obvious right thing to do. No opinions accompanying the order. Impossible to say what motivated them. The court's weighing a similar issue in Wisconsin. In Pennsylvania, the state Democratic Party and its allies had sought the extension so they could, of course, add additional ballots once they knew how many they needed. A furious Donald Trump called Rupert Murdock to scream at him after Fox called Arizona for Joe Biden. This was embarrassingly bad. The Associated Press called Arizona for Biden, but NBC and CNN at that point in time had yet to do so. We called it long before MSNBC, when outraged staffer on the opinion side told the magazine we were so worried about being seen as pro-Trump that we bent over backwards. Andrew Krell, Fox News, has Biden at 264, 6 away from victory, while many other outlets are at 253. So this means if enough Nevada residents come in tonight, Fox News could conceivably be the first to call the election for Biden and do it during Hannity or Ingram's show. Well, there you have latest. I don't know what's going on now, but I take it they're calling these different states for Joe Biden, but only because of the massive fraud that I expect to be exposed virtually forthwith. I think that if Pieczenick is right, that the action has to be taken in the immediate future, not later than this weekend, in my opinion. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, this has to happen fast because one thing I've read is the Biden strategy is going to be to declare victory as quickly as possible and then start forming his government and his cabinet immediately to solidify the effect that, he's the president-elect. And by the way, Jim, I like your background with the big stack of books and papers. It's very professor-ish. Carl Herman brought up the exit polls yesterday, and I thought he made a great point. Like, what happened to exit polls that used to be an integral part of the election? And of course, the excuse they're using is, well, we cannot have exit polls because there are so many mail-in ballots. And, the exit polls are a crucial part of verifying the intent of the voters, and that's pretty much disappeared, and it's down the memory hole, not one mention about it. And, as far as changing all these election laws, what it really comes down to is they're just moving the goalposts around as necessary and then count up the votes until they win. That's the strategy, and it's just right there in everyone's face. They're not even trying to hide it. It's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen.
Scorpio, you got it 100% correct. We need exit polls to validate the reported outcomes of the election. As I mentioned then, in European countries, they use the exit polling to determine the winner, and the tabulated vote merely as verification. Susan, your thoughts?
I also agree with Scorpio, and I think that Biden plans to declare the victory as a fait accompli, and if that happens, then they're going to accuse Trump of trying to steal the election, and that's going to justify more violence and chaos. So I think it is critical that Trump acts as soon as possible. Also, I think it's really disappointing that we don't have a loyal opposition in the media. Murdock is like Maxwell. He's an agent of the City of London who has cheerleaded for these wars for empire on behalf of the globalists. So it's very unfortunate that even in this time, he can't at least support the president with integrity. He's going to join the globalists in their efforts to take him down.
Well, as Pieczenick was explaining too, in the art of war, you let your enemies reveal themselves. And truly, this may turn out to be the greatest political sting the world will ever see. And no one would be better positioned to actually pull this off than Donald J. Trump, who's been underestimated again and again and again. I believe he's been right on top of this from the beginning, and we're only learning how he has been dealing with it now. Meanwhile, the steel is on. What Republicans must do next to guarantee victory. The battle for America is on. While Trump had amassed huge, seemingly insurmountable leads in key states across the country, Democratic officials went quiet in their cities, releasing no results until it was clear exactly how many they would need to win. And then, like a cascade, they poured out the numbers Wednesday morning, claiming staggering early vote margins that washed away the president's lead in state after state. Democrats have terrible policies for America, but give them credit for one thing. They know when to count their ballots. In his razor-thin win in 1960, John F. Kennedy carried Illinois by less than 10,000 votes out of 4.7 cast. His narrow victory was enabled by Mayor Daley's political machine. An investigative journalist found anomalies such as 56 votes cast from a single house, votes by the dead, other stunts like swapping cash for votes. Following the election, 3 members of the machine were sent to jail for vote fraud activities, more than 600 indicted before being acquitted by a judge allied with Daley. Now the same stunt is being pulled on a far grander scale. The con was in the works long before Election Day. For months beforehand, the press bombarded the public with bogus polls showing huge leads for Biden in almost every swing state. On election night, these worthless polls were exposed, but they were still used by the press to justify not calling states for Trump. Now they will be used to justify dramatic last-second swings into the Democratic column. Republicans are asking for the election to be snatched away. That is the only honest way to describe it. They're standing around while the most banana republic third world cities in America vomit up their votes at the very end. This is an invitation to humiliation. For months, Democrats signaled they were ready to do anything to drive Trump from the presidency. Now they're delivering on that promise. They cannot be allowed to succeed. This isn't just a battle in the courts, in the streets, or in the legislature. The coming battle is for who can control the narrative and tell the better story. It is an info war. The Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself must tell the public what is happening. There is an effort to steal the election, but Trump already won and is going to fight to solidify the victory. That means not conceding any of the Democratic Party lies about what's happening. The right must project strength and confidence and a fierce determination to fight the Democrats every step of the way, no matter the cost, up to and including GOP legislators declaring the results illegitimate and sending pro-Trump electors to Washington. The tech companies must be shoved aside by force and any means necessary. Color revolutions are driven by narrative control, with a press and powerful corporations telling the public what they're allowed to think, what they're allowed to believe. The most effective and quick way to overcome the left's narrative is for the president to schedule an appearance as soon as possible on Tucker's show so he can speak directly to the American people about the blatant election theft unfolding before our very eyes and outline the path forward to victory. Every American who fought for Trump and stood in line to vote for him wants to hear he's not going to take this deal lying down. He'll do everything he can to fight for the integrity of the election and the will of the American voters. Furthermore, patriots everywhere need marching orders. Meanwhile, there were two massive absurdities the mainstream media pushed on the American people regarding Joe Biden during the election cycle. The first was that Joe Biden has a functional brain that's firing on all cylinders. The second is that Joe Biden is a moderate. As for Joe's brain, we all know it's not true. The guy is a literal poster child for dementia. Back during the primary season, many of Biden's opponents zeroed in on that fact and called him out for his deer-in-the-headlights debate performances. The media agreed back then, but after they rigged the Democratic primary to make Joe the nominee, he was suddenly just fine again. No cognitive decline to concern yourself with, America. And moderate, Joe Biden's climate plan is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Green New Deal. It's on his website, just with AOC's name removed. Joe's really bad at plagiarism too. Here's the way it really looks. If I'm elected, there won't be any red states or blue states. They'll all be green states. No gas, no fracking, no drilling, no coal. Stunning. Meanwhile, the guy they put out at the debate isn't even Joe Biden. It's not the same guy. Having dealt extensively with body doubles in the case of Paul McCartney and of Hillary Clinton, for example, it was probably easier for me to notice a guy who debated Donald Trump on the national stage twice, in fact, the second in Nashville, was not Joe Biden than for most of the public. Having made that observation, however, it became incumbent upon me to bring the matter to the attention of the appropriate authorities, where a submission has been made to the FBI field office in Nashville by a California attorney of note, with support from my friend and colleague Scott Bennett, who, like myself, is a former commissioned officer of the U.S. military, Scott Army, Marine Corps. I published this on my blog. Not only they have a difference, because Joe Biden had pendant earlobes, whereas his body double does not. The double has brown eyes, Joe has blue. You can see the difference, where the ears curl up here to have a pendant earlobe, but his actually curl down. Meanwhile, the body language with the family is completely different as well. Joe with Jill, she's always beaming, typically arm in arm or hand in hand. With a body double, she's looking very sober, not cheerful. He's looking glum. Joe Biden of the past always had a shit-eating grin on his face. It was unmistakable. Where James McCanney, after receiving a copy of this, my blog, observed, the guy on the right, the double, has obviously had plastic surgery to alter his eyes, for example. The evidence is overwhelming. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, Jim, I'd like to hear James McCanney's take on this election fraud. He's something he knows quite a bit about. He's researched it in depth. And, the Democrats are just following the 2018 template they used to steal a bunch of the House seats back then. They simply just kept, the votes aren't counted yet. And lo and behold, the results are changed slowly but surely. That's what they did in 2018. And, Jeff Rentz had an interesting guest the other night talking about how they're doing the voter fraud in Nevada, specifically in Las Vegas. What they've been doing is using the unions to sign up illegal aliens to vote, helping them get fraudulent IDs, and their shop stewards are requiring them to vote Democrat. And that even made an article in the paper in, I think 2008 or 2012 in Las Vegas. So that's how they're doing it, at least in some states. And we're going to see more and more of these so-called Republicans, these rhinos like Chris Christie and Mitt Romney, have already come out with knives drawn, stabbing Trump in the back over this election. I think we're going to see more come out as time goes on. And, Joe Biden, you had that cartoon of Joe Biden talking about the red states and blue states. he stole that line from Barack Obama in 2004 when Bonesman John Kerry invited him to speak at the DNC convention, where Obama said, "There's no red states, there's no blue states, there's only the United States." So that's another, example of Joe Biden's plagiarism.
Yeah, absolutely right. No doubt about it. Susan, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. So of course, I agree with Scorpio's interesting points. I think that the strategy that's being borne out is it's devised from the City of London, Tavistock Institute, as they've determined psychologically people are inclined to conform to peer pressure. So they want to create the illusion that there's this peer pressure. Everybody is against Trump and for Biden, when the opposite is actually the case. And I think that they're pressing so hard that the people, that what they may not be anticipating is the people are going to react opposite to that, because they don't want to be pressured. They want to come to that conclusion of their own free will. I agree with you that it's ridiculous that there is this incredible support for Biden. He's a senile old man, as you pointed out. And most people know that if he were elected, Kamala Harris would be the president. And she was one of the least popular of all the presidential candidates that they ran, during the primaries.
Yeah, 100% correct. I mean, Joe Biden, in 35 years in office, running for the presidency 3 times, had not won a single caucus or a single primary until South Carolina, when Google came to his defense, giving these voter turnout reminders to those they knew would support Biden. And of course, it's been unrelenting ever since.
Those are great points that Susan made, especially the one about the peer pressure and the psychological techniques. I totally agree. Very, very astute observation.
And I intend to have James McCanny as my guest on not 1 but 2 shows this coming week, Scorpio.
Oh, great.
Meanwhile, Barack Obama had privately expressed grave concerns about Joe Biden's 2020 White House run. President Obama sure did take a long time to finally endorse Biden for his 2020 run. The world couldn't help but notice that Biden's former partner in crime didn't exactly hop at the chance to endorse Biden after it was clear he'd become the candidate. Now we may know why. Don't estimate Joe's ability to F things up. Despite the endorsement, the former Obama administration painting a rosy picture of the relationship, it turns out, as the Post has reported, it was fraught with tension. A former White House communication director, Jen Psaki, commented of the relationship, you could certainly see technocratic eye rolling at times. The attitude reportedly is what led Obama to endorse Hillary instead of Joe in 2016. The president was not encouraging Biden said of Obama's support in 2016. And while Obama was keeping his distance from Biden after his 2020 announcement, he was talking him down behind the scene. Obama finally came and endorsed Biden in April. I believe Joe has all the qualities we need in a president right now. He's someone whose own life has taught him how to persevere. But speaking about Biden's presence in Iowa during the caucuses, Obama said, you know who really doesn't have it? Joe Biden. Why leak this story now, right before the DNC convention? All right, here we go. Best Friends Day, Joe Biden to his friend Barack Obama. Joe and Barack. Meanwhile, look how we have lost track of all the scandals which haven't been reported at all. The Biden secret emails, the disgusting stuff, the contradiction of Biden's claim during the debate. He never involved himself in his son's business activities. Here's a photograph of him having a meeting with a Ukrainian oligarch who is involved in Burisma that he claimed never happened. There it is in photograph. And we know how with his brother, Jim Hunter, he and Jim, the Biden crime family, ran operations with China involving a $40 million investment in a Louisiana natural gas project. But the public didn't hear a word about any of this. Meanwhile, here's the example Biden's been set. I spied on Americans, armed ISIS, gave Iran billions, covered up Benghazi, used the IRS as a weapon, and sold 20% of our uranium to Russia. And I got away with it. pathetic. But there it is. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Barack Obama was essentially a living saint the entire 8 years he was in office. I don't think the mainstream media ever criticized him for anything. It's just amazing. And, Obama even said about ISIS that it might take generations to defeat ISIS. They were planning on keeping that scam going for a long time, but Putin put an end to all that. And, Obama's campaigning for Groper Joe was less than enthusiastic. He was kind of just going through the motions. And of course, this campaign's really about Kamala Harris. She's the one that will be in power very shortly after the election if Groper Joe manages to slide his way into the White House.
And a worst possible choice is hard to imagine.
Yeah, that's true.
Susan, your thoughts?
I agree with the sentiments. In terms of Obama getting away with it, I don't think he will. I believe that if Trump is able to secure a victory, and I believe he will, I believe Obama will be prosecuted as well. So I think a lot of these characters will be brought to justice.
Assuming this plays out and that the blockchain has its intended consequences as Pieczenick has outlined, I couldn't agree more. And the sooner the better. There's a guy. Meanwhile, we want to hear from you. Send fan mail, pro or con, to liveneedtoknow@gmail.com. liveneedtoknow@gmail.com. Meanwhile, let me remind you, in the face of this massive fraud, which is a conspiracy of unimaginable proportions, know that on December 5th and 6th, I'm going to have a 2-day false flag and conspiracies conference over the internet. 24 of the best experts across the board. Check out the program. Go to falseflagconspiracies2020.com. Recommend you consider this highly. Get your mind off the nonsense, but get a better grip on the reality of what we're confronted with here. Meanwhile, one of my correspondents has observed report election fraud from Beverly. Your latest post about the two Bidens. Sean Hannity has a voter fraud email where people can report incidents of fraud. Send it to vote2020@hannity.com. You need to get this out to anyone with even the slightest connection to Trump. I have tried to find valid contact info for Mark Levin, but have been unsuccessful. Send also to Tucker Carlson. The only contact email I can find is on the Fox News site for his show. Does Robert David Steele know how to contact Rudy Giuliani? If yes, forward your article to Giuliani. If I find a contact email for him, I will let you know. Also send your info to Project Veritas. I sent an email, but yours would be better as it has the detailed photos and info. Newt Gingrich is another person to contact. I'm at work now and can't truly research anything on my computer, but we'll try to find contact emails for Giuliani and Gingrich. If you think of any others, send your article. I heard something about 90% voter participation in one of the Michigan counties. You don't have 90% registered voters there. I am certain we are officially a banana republic. Send your article to everyone you know who might have a connection to Trump from Beverly and Charlotte. Beverly is wonderful. I couldn't agree more with her advice, but I cannot do this on my own. Everyone who has the ability, you can find it on my blog at jamesfetzer.org. I've sent it out to several hundred on an email list. Please share and send this to everyone. I believe that even if they were successful in pulling off this fraud with the ballots, that this would invalidate the Democratic campaign. They were putting out a party who was not designated by the party. No one knows his true identity. And I have cited in my blog the code of the United States that would render this election invalid, meaning nullify the Democrats' candidate and give the election to Trump by default. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Yeah, we need to get a DNA test with this guy and Hunter Biden and see if they're related. I doubt they are. Using your evidence that you've presented, I've actually convinced, or at least made several people I know personally, to double think about this Biden character, that, this isn't the same guy. So it's very interesting. And I just want to thank Susan for coming on the show. She made some great points today, especially the one about the Tavistock Institute using peer pressure and psychological manipulation upon the masses. That is so, so true. And you've really got me thinking there. And by the way, Susan, I like your background. Those chairs in the background look comfortable and ready to enjoy a nice cup of tea, maybe.
Thank you so much.
Susan, your final thoughts.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate those kind words, Scorpio. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, and I appreciate your comments as well. I think what we're seeing is like the Democratic Party show their hand, and the Democrats have for a long time created these fictitious identities and backgrounds for their candidates. Like I think Obama was another one. He had kind of a sketchy background that they embellished. And I think, hopefully going forward, we'll be more circumspect about the candidates, and, we'll be able to kind of, have some more truth and integrity in the voting process. I think, Trump is exposing, these people for what they are. And I think the Biden example is another, case in point.
Well, this is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, thanking David Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador and Susan Bradford from Springfield, Virginia, for the excellence of their commentary today. Let me add, the reason this Biden has appeared to be so much more forceful, articulate, is because he's not the real Joe Biden. They pulled a bait and switch on the American people. Joe's anti-dementia medication had the unfortunate side effect of incontinence, so he couldn't even be on a debate stage for 90 minutes. When they requested breaks every 30 minutes to change his adult diaper, and it was rejected by the Trump crew, they went with Plan B. Their attempt is to boonswoggle the entire United States of America, even the world. We must not let them get away with it. I ask for your support in this effort. At the very least, share this blog with everyone you know. Let them understand this is a massive fraud by the Democratic Party. If we can blow this apart, we can destroy that party forever and the mainstream media that has been aiding and abetting them. This is the most disgusting turn of events in American history, in my judgment, bar none. Thanks for watching today. Pay attention to the news. We'll be back on Monday with what you need to know. See you then.